Well, what's going to happen is there are going to be a lot of trade deals, and there's going to be clarity on the tax cuts, and then firms are going to lift off. But think about it. Even before that happened, we're getting really strong jobs numbers. First quarter capital equipment investment was north of 20%, one of the best quarters ever, because all of America knows that the golden age is coming, and we got to start building stuff before everybody else gets in front of us. And so I think that you're going to look at a second half of the year that's way, way north of 3%, probably north of 4%, to give us one of the better years we've ever had. Because even with the uncertainty that you talk about, that I've written widely about over the last 25 years, even with that uncertainty, we've got strong jobs numbers and strong investment. And so once the uncertainty is lowered, then a liftoff from there is really going to be something to see.
National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett with me yesterday on this program, predicting 4% plus growth in the U.S. economy in the second half of this year. Joining me now is OLeary Ventures Chairman Kevin OLeary. Kevin, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. And in the past, you've raised some concerns about the direction of the U.S. economy. What is your reaction to what you just heard from Kevin Hassett?
Well, I like to be an optimist, and 4% would be spectacular.
Yeah.
It would be absolutely phenomenal. Now, I don't know if we're going to get there, but he did bring up the tariff issues. And the way I look at the tariff deal is we've got this date of July 9th, and that's when the 90-day freeze, particularly on the China package, comes off. Will we have resolution by then? And what I mean by that, Maria, is what I think's happening here, because the tariffs are all over the map. I mean, the Canadians just dropped their tariffs practically to zero, and yet we still have tariffs on them. The European thing is in flux. Of course, we've got the Japanese situation, the Indian. I'd like to see resolution to all of this at whatever the reciprocal rate's going to be. And the way I look at it, and I think the way the market's starting to look at it, given the recovery we've had, maybe we're going to a place where reciprocal platform is around 10%, which effectively becomes a value-added tax on America, a consumption tax, like every other country has. We've been never able to pass a consumption tax through Congress, but if we call it a tariff, it seems to be able to work. So if that's where we're going, the market's going to be okay with that, because there's so many countries around the world and economies that function very well between 7% and 14% consumption taxes. If that's where we're going, he could be right. But if it's more chaos and more 145 and the China package is on its own an issue around IP law and everything else, we've got a lot of moving parts here. But right now, the market's willing to give the administration the benefit of the doubt.
Well, because President Trump has been right. I mean, you know it. You've talked about China and its bad behavior. How else is he going to move the needle on this bad behavior, these non-tariff barriers? But look, you recently said that the president's big, beautiful bill is a disaster for small business. Why?
Very simple. You remember the PPP and ERC programs. They were the only bills available during the pandemic to small business. All the other bills, like the CHIPS and Science Act, the infrastructure bill, all of that, there wasn't a dime in there for small business. And there are millions of small businesses in America. And they drew down the PPP and the ERC to stay alive and keep their employees employed. And it worked. Now, we've got a situation in this new beautiful bill, and I don't think anybody reads these things. I read it. I read all these bills through the eyes of small business. And I found a section in there that looks like a cut and paste that says the IRS will get extended powers to audit small businesses for up to 9 years that took the ERC. Now, that is going to cause chaos in valuations. If you have that hanging over your head, it almost seems unfair and un-American to do that to small business. And I'm not sure everybody's aware of this provision in the bill. I'm heading down tonight to the Hill to get a gong and walk down the halls banging it, saying, what are you guys doing here? You can't do that to small business. Somebody should fix this in the big, beautiful bill, because it's not beautiful for small business. That's totally unfair, because if you're trying to do a deal or get financing or raise capital, and you know you've got that uncertainty for 9 years, that's going to cause chaos.
Well, look, we've had Kelly Loeffler on this program, the head of the small business, and she's talked all about supporting small business. Are you telling me that there's nothing in the bill that supports small business?
No, I'm telling you, Maria, there's a provision in here that hurts small business, and it really will be devastating to them. And I don't know how it got in there. It could have been a cut and paste from a previous bill. But whatever it is, somebody's got to raise the red flag, and I'm going to do it, because this is not good. You know, small business creates 62% of jobs. And every small business in my portfolio has called me and said, what the hell is this? Where'd this come from? Of course I took ERC because I had to stay alive, and now they're punishing me for it. I understand, Maria, there was fraud in the ERC, as there's fraud in every government program. But to punish every small business in America this way makes absolutely no sense. And I'm very optimistic that this will get fixed before this big, beautiful bill passes. I don't think enough people know about this, and I thank you for bringing it up, because this is a huge problem.
Well, look, I didn't bring it up. You brought it up. But I want to say this. What I am going to bring up is this. There's increased loan approvals and lending activity. The SBA has seen a significant increase in loan approvals under Kelly Loeffler. 80% increase in loan approvals, okay? So they're trying to move things forward faster. You've got this focus on deregulation. They're taking red tape out so that small business can move forward. They want to extend the tax cuts so that small business can get tax cuts there. They're trying to streamline and reorganize the SBA, and they want to get a focus on American manufacturing and bringing supply chains back to America. So for you to sit here and tell me that there's nothing in here for small business and that small business is getting screwed in the big, beautiful bill, I just don't see it. However, I will look at what you're talking about in terms of the IRS.
I agree with all of those provisions, but the one that's overhanging that really, really hurts is giving more power to the IRS to cause conflict with small business. Who wants to do that? What Republican wants to give more power?
I don't like that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well then let's agree on that. But everything else, I applaud any support for small business. And right now, with rates over 7% on mortgages, it's really important to give them these. But this overhanging war on small business from the IRS, that's got to go.
Okay. I want to get your take before you go on China, because did you see what happened with cattle? Shares of the Chinese battery company soaring in Hong Kong, up 16%. Now it's the largest equity offering so far this year, Kevin. You and I have had this discussion about all those Chinese stocks traded on U.S. exchanges. That's another economic lever for President Trump to pull. He hasn't gone there yet. We know that would be death for the Chinese Communist Party, for actually see those Chinese stocks get off of U.S. exchanges, because that ends their funding by American investors. That's why cattle went public in Hong Kong. Your reaction?
Look, I agree. They have to go attract capital wherever they can get it. But at the end of the day, the biggest market still remains the United States of America, not only for the purchase of batteries, but also for capital markets. So that has to get resolved. But I will say one thing. Most of us that are investors, and in small business and large, want to do business with the Chinese people. It's a massive market. We want that deal done. We just want to protect our IP. We want access to the legal system to resolve trade disputes. I'm a China hawk. I've said let's go 400% so we have an embargo until this gets worked out. Yeah. The China package is different than all the rest of the tariffs. We've talked about that quite a bit. I really want this China deal done so that opens up the markets. Let us compete on a level playing field, and it'll be great.
What did you think about the stablecoin legislation? The Senate advanced this landmark stablecoin legislation late last night. We weren't sure. For a minute there, I thought it was, dead on arrival. 16 Democrats flipped after ethics standards for government employees and limits for tech companies issuing stablecoins were included in the bill. Democrat Senator Mark Warner, one of the 16 to flip, said that the latest bill is not perfect, but the U.S. cannot afford to keep standing on the sidelines. This now legislation moves to the Senate floor for debate, with the final vote happening as early as Friday. Kevin, you and I have spoken in the past about the banks and whether or not they were complicit. Maybe they don't want legislation to move forward. The Genius Act, they didn't want that to move forward because maybe it infringes on their own business.
This is a groundbreaking move. Congratulations to Haggerty, 66 votes. It now goes to the Senate. Thune, I hope, can bring it before the break. We don't know yet. But this is so important for us to be competitive in digital payment systems around the world. And I know what happened on the flips. I'm sure Schumer had something to do with this. He basically said, look, I don't want to give them a 2/3. I'm going to let them get it through, but I want to hold back on a partisan basis. That's probably what occurred. But still, 66 is enough. It's good enough. And this bill is relatively clean. It's a groundbreaker for crypto, because once we get this passed, this is not Bitcoin. This is just digital payment systems, but it does assure us that the U.S. dollar becomes the de facto currency around the world for price discovery on commodities. Who doesn't want that? Elizabeth Warren tried very hard to shut it down. She wasn't successful, and I'm happy about that.
All right, so am I going to see you with a gong on Capitol Hill, up and down the halls today? Is that what I'm going to see today?
Yes, and I'll have one of those symbols on my back and a gong going right. That's what I'm going to do.
We'll set some cameras over there. Kevin, good to see you, my friend. Thank you.